Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our next Touch Base. Today, we are going to have a very exciting session with Tim Glenn and with Justin Morales from Recruitment. We are discussing RecOps. Now, Justin is going to join us in just a moment. We're going to invite him live on screen. Jane's going to be making introductions and speaking to our millennial entrepreneur, Tim Glenn. I am Jennifer van Riet from Silver 17 Consulting. Super excited about today, as mentioned before, because we are slap bang in the fourth industrial revolution. The future of work is not coming anymore. It has arrived. And so we have to respond to our new reality. And RecOps is one of these wonderful, exciting technical ways in which we can respond to our new normal. Without further ado, I'm going to close down my video, and Jane's going to take over, and Justin will be joining us just in a little while. Thanks, Jane. Thanks, Tim.
Cool.
Thanks, Jen. So welcome very much, Tim. We're very excited. I know that you're back here fresh from the Karoo.
Yeah.
And for those of you who aren't used to our webinars, I see a lot of familiar voices and faces in our chat box. But Jennifer and I started Touch Base during lockdown, actually, when we saw a need for our clients and for people that we knew to be able to remain updated on the latest trends, because it wasn't an era that we were waiting for anymore. It was upon us. And so we've continued with that as we've gone through the different levels. I normally work for Out of Box Thinking, doing training in the recruitment industry. And Jen normally does a lot of Boolean work. And I see one of our webinar co-hosts, Vanessa, is in our chat box as well. We do our Collaborate to Navigate together. And so, yeah, we're really excited to have Tim and shortly Justin with us today, because, Tim, I know that you have been working with approaches and methodologies that are different to the traditional ones in the recruitment industry. And I've had a lot of people coming to me and saying, oh, I'm so excited for this event. I have somebody, Danielle, I don't know if she's here yet, but she's been studying Scrum and Agile, and she's currently trying to implement this within her area. Hello, welcome, Justin.
Hello. Yes, Justin.
Welcome, welcome. Thanks. And so I know she, for example, will have a lot of questions for both of you today. So we're really grateful that you're here, you're ready to share your expertise. You're so generous with being willing to share all of the things that you're doing and that you're finding are working well for you. And thank you for being available for all the questions that I know people are going to be wanting to ask as well. So for those who have joined us, please do start posting your questions in the place where you can ask a question. You'll see the bottom right-hand side of your screen, so we can make sure we have enough time for those. And Jen has also put up a couple of polls for you to engage with as well. But I'm going to let Tim and Justin introduce themselves and give us a little bit of a background in terms of where you come from and what you're doing now. So Tim, we'll start with you since you're the owner of Recruitment.
Thank you. First things, just want to apologize for the beard, Justin's hair. Lockdown has allowed us to grow a lot of facial hair, so apologies for Justin looking a bit like Ace Ventura over there. Yeah, so look, we started Recruitment a good couple of years ago. We both Justin joined me a little bit after starting Recruitment, but we both kind of felt that the recruitment industry had stagnated. We wanted to build a business that we could come in, we could make the difference, we could be adaptive and be able to keep up with the growing pace of our clients. So when Justin did join me, we started kind of doing things in a different manner. And I think, from that point, I've come from one of the larger agencies, and yeah, we felt that there was a lot of room for improvement. So that's why we ended up setting up Recruitment. It's kind of the anti-norm is what we kind of went for in the beginning.
Okay, excellent. And Justin, apart from being a super incredible athlete. Tell us a little bit more about your background in recruitment.
Yeah, so I mean, I suppose the tricky thing is I never came from a recruitment background. So my first sort of glimpse into the industry was joining forces with Tim. And I suppose my experience does, I suppose I find my experience more on the people side of things. So just from my previous business experience and from what I studied, I always had a fascination with the way people thought and the way that they operated. And I suppose when we joined forces, it was that mesh between Tim's experience, my experience with working with people and understanding people, which is where we sort of got things going, and where the priority has always been on being innovative and trying to be different. And so we've spent the past couple of years trying to refine processes and do things that are, I guess, left of center, but they are seemingly working to our benefit at the moment.
No, very exciting. I think we're definitely in a space where people are asking a lot of questions around how to reinvent themselves, how to do things differently. So we're really excited to hear about what you find is working. And I think the people side and the innovation side are perfect for the recruitment industry. So I can imagine why you're thriving.
Sure.
But Tim, you said you'd noticed some things in the recruitment industry, areas for improvement, opportunities for improvement. What were those specifically that stood out for you?
I think one of the main things that stood out was that, the systems they've been going for 20, 30 years. Everyone thought this is the system, this is how everyone's done it, this is why we need to do it this way, it works. No one ever thought, cool, let's make it work better. And so, we got to the point where we were like, cool, we can do it the same way, but then nothing differentiates us from the next agency. We find candidates, we'll call ourselves great, and hope clients love us. So we looked at every possible aspect of how we do things and then try to work on ways to improve it and innovate on it. So not too many things I can mention specifically, but just the way that things were done, the promises that were made, no one really kind of took it any steps further down the line. So we made that a priority for us.
Okay. So you've called it RecOps. So I don't know whether that's your term or whether that was something you found along the way.
It's not my term. I wish I could coin it, but no, it's not mine. Look, there's a lot of agencies internationally that utilize RecOps. For those who don't quite know what RecOps is, it's recruitment operations. It's the infrastructure behind recruitment. It's all the processes and procedures that make recruiters good. If you do not employ any aspect of RecOps, you're living in a chaotic world where you're unhappy. You have to be. So yeah, everything that is recruitment infrastructure is what RecOps is. A lot of people do use the term RecOps for recruitment optimization, but in my case, I think they kind of go hand in hand.
Okay. So can you tell us a little bit more around why the way that you do things is different, your recruitment operations and processes and systems? What's different about that from the norm? Because you're the anti-norm. So, yeah.
So we've adopted 4 different pillars in our business as part of our RecOps. So those pillars are data analysis, sourcing support, reducing bottlenecking, and continuous development. We can go through them in a lot of detail in a little bit, but those sort of, we identified those as being the fundamentals of RecOps for us. So one of the main things was, on the data analysis front, Justin's done various courses on data analysis. He's kind of our go-to analyst when it comes to this. But we started using different metrics. We started focusing on different aspects. We started revisiting things that may seem a bit silly to someone who's been in recruitment for 10, 15 years. But we dug so deep that we understood the core of why we were doing it. And Justin will go through some of the sort of metrics and the data we do use. But I think when you understood the fundamentals, we were able to really work out where we can trim the fat.
I suppose just to jump in, I think it was a matter of being critical of the process. So, once we defined what the process was for us, it became more about not just accepting it for this is the way that it's always happened or this is the way it's always been done, this makes it right.
Yeah.
We've always adopted an approach where it's kind of like, okay, if things aren't working, we need to change it. So let's be sort of consistent in, not accepting the process as it is, being innovative, and being adaptive throughout.
For sure. At the moment, we're living in a world where there's so much constant communication, so much noise, that we wanted to then kind of reduce that noise and offer a very clear message. And we used, as I said, we used different sort of data sets that we've collected over the past few years in order to help us reduce that noise.
Excellent. I love what you're saying about not accepting things, applying critical thinking. I know that is one of the skills identified for people to have to be able to succeed in the future of work is critical thinking. And yet not many people necessarily do that. And recruitment has been an industry where traditionally it gets handed down that this is how you do things, this is how you measure things. So I think, a lot of us would love to hear more around that data analysis side and the metrics that you use. So is that something that you want to go into now? Justin, can you give us a little bit more, Tim?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I suppose the way that we've done it is, I think just from the beginning when we all got involved with ServRecruit, it was a matter of being able to, I suppose, analyze the success of our processes. So I suppose you can look at recruitment as a life cycle, and like we said, it's not just about seeing it as, this is the way that we need to do it. It's being critical, but you can't just be critical based on assumptions. You need to be able to look at processes and make informed decisions based on what you've seen from the past. So that's when we started incorporating different processes into our life cycle, where we analyzed data based on performance. So when we start looking at the data analytics, what we can do is we can actually forecast deliverables. We're able to, I suppose, look at, where have we gone wrong along the way, and refine that throughout the process. So, from a data analytics perspective, what we have started doing is tracking our processes right from the beginning to the end. So each recruiter in our team is privy to what the other recruiter is doing. So we have live documents where we're tracking the number of outreach that we do, the number of responses we get, the number of CVs we send, and the number of placements we're making based on that. And the way that we look at it is each role that we're filling or looking to fill is a project, and each project has its metrics. And those metrics then not only inform our process, but it also helps us to go to our clients and show our clients, this is what we're doing, this is how we're delivering, this is the amount of time it takes. So now it's like this shift from a recruiter or an agency telling a client, we're going to place your role, like, don't worry. It's less about just making these sort of loose statements. Now it's about saying, we're going to deliver X number of CVs on this date. This is the process. This is when the role will be finished. And we're able to make those assumptions now based on our past data and our performance.
For sure. In line with those sort of live tracking documents, we even track the actual candidates that we've reached out to. So at any point, if I need Justin to jump onto a role that I'm working, or I need to jump on a role that he's working, we have those live documents to be able to see who has been reached out to, who hasn't, and that's enabled us to create a way of increasing sort of client satisfaction in that point. Because generally, if you've lined up one or two interviews, a hiring manager is going to start relaxing. So our top priority is what we call, it's one of the sprints that we do, but a sprint is to set up the first interview. So if we pick up a new role, Justin and I might jump onto it in the very beginning just to be able to set up that first interview. And then I might go back to the role that I previously was working. So that initial speed, it stops that client worrying. It stops them from going to another agency or another agency. It stops them trying to focus on advertising themselves, and it minimizes our risk. Recruitment's all about minimizing risk at the moment. And that's one of the methods that we've employed to minimize our risk and just maximize the output that is required.
And often that's going to take you a certain level of being fluid as a business. I think it's quite easy to fill into a systematic approach to doing things. But I suppose that's when it comes into being more of an agile, or having more of an agile approach to the way that we do things. It's like having that fluidity and being collaborative in the way that we do things. At the end of the day, we need to deliver. and we're going to do what it takes to deliver. And if that means allocating more resources, like Tim said, to a particular project, then so be it.
So more of a collaborative approach within the team, as opposed to everyone having their role that they're working on, and maybe having more collaboration, less competition, in line with what we're seeing around this time.
For sure.
And I like what you're saying about,
I think one of the traditional methods was within an agency, you have your own role. Yes, there is that support from a manager, but there's very little sort of collaboration, very little support. You work your own role, you bring in your own business. No one really buys into the greater good of the business, and the business most certainly does not buy into you as a recruiter. So what we've adopted, and I think that's been one of our biggest sort of saving points during this pandemic at the moment, is that everyone's bought into the greater good of the business. And at this point, we have no one sort of selfishly vying for commission, or, everyone's like, we're going to get through this together. And we've got a very good team, all sort of pushing the same direction, which is great.
Love that. And I think a lot of consultancies would love to be able to have that if they don't have that already. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more. I know you guys kind of in your athletic sprints end up sometimes in the same area having coffee around Buitenverwachting. But besides that, what do you do, or what have you done to get everyone to buy into the greater good of the business and not just kind of work for, me, I've got to survive, my commission?
Sure, I think there's a ton of things that all kind of vie into that. I think one of the things was in the actual hiring process, when Justin joined, it was a little bit different, but we've got two others in the team. When they joined us, we highlighted that they add value regardless. So we do things called, we have innovation days. And one of the great things in this time where we dedicate to finding a new solution, to finding a problem. If Justin comes up with a very cool problem, we often let him run with that project. And that just allows recruiters in general to feel that they're adding value without necessarily only making a placement. We find in a lot of the bigger agencies, if you're not physically making the placement yourself, you bring no value, and your boss is very quickly going to tell you, hang on, buddy, let's put you on performance review. But you believe as in any sports match, an assist is as important as actually scoring the points. And I just think we've managed to instill a sense of everyone brings value to the table in their own right. And I think that, from the very get-go, every time we brought someone new on board.
Yeah, I think what Tim's done very well is it's trying to create a space of ownership. So not just from a project perspective, but also just your own business perspective. So, we make sure that everyone on the team feels heard. So, twice a year at least, probably a minimum of twice a year, we sit down and we analyze how things are going for each individual in the team. From things that have gone well, things that haven't gone well, things that the manager or the owner's done well, hasn't done well. And from there, we have an opportunity to then relook or maybe incorporate different processes based on their experiences. So it's not like you go through a whole year having not felt heard, but now it's open communication throughout the whole process. And I think that's what's worked very well for us.
For sure. Sometimes it's not that easy to hear as a manager, but we did it in the beginning of lockdown. We're talking about how we can better the company, how I can better my leadership style, how Justin can better his leadership style. What is his weakness? What is mine? Sometimes it does take that sort of, someone else's eyes to really highlight that flaw in yourself or that aspect of you that needs improvement. Sometimes it's tough, but it's 100% necessary. There can be no further growth if everyone, including the managers, is stagnant. And that's what we've spent a lot of time getting involved in.
Love that, Tim. I see Jennifer has popped up. That might be because there are some questions that are happening in the background there that she wants to flag for us.
Hello,
Jennifer, hello.
Yes, well, you can see I've been very active in the side, so I'm just going to mute you guys for a moment so that I can talk without feedback. Because this is one of my favorites. Oh dear, we lost Justin there, Tim, but he'll come back in a moment. So it's super interesting, and there is a wonderful question that came up here, Tim. It is from Danielle, and she said, "Have you adopted to Kanban, Scrum, or Scrumban?"
We do have a Kanban board. I think the Kanban side benefits us better.
First, explain what Kanban is first, if you don't mind.
Sure. Kanban, I mean, Kanban's a method of project management. It utilizes a Kanban board to kind of track tasks, to track outputs. So from our side, our Kanban board is super important. It's actually on the wall behind me here. You can't see it there, but yeah.
And shift the screen.
Method. It's like on top of the bar counter, but everything at the moment is, I mean, our office is empty. But yeah, so we've adopted Kanban as our sort of method.
Okay.
Okay, and what how do you use it in a nutshell? How do you use it on a sprint, on a recruitment sprint?
So our main focus is, you know, one of the things that we always wanted to include in our business is that we never wanted a candidate to approach us for feedback. We never wanted a client to come to us and say, "Hey, what's happening?" So we use that as a constant way of, yes, tracking a candidate process, but mainly tracking who has received the attention they need, because we place a lot of emphasis on three main things in our business, and it's a better recruiter experience, a better candidate experience, and a better client experience.
And that's what you want. That's what sets you apart, right?
100%. You know, a lot of the time, our board sits and we'll chat every day at the board. We'll work out who's going where. We'll work out who's been contacted, who hasn't, which client needs to know what, which candidate needs to know what. And at the end of the day, we get so many thanks from our candidates for saying, you know, you guys said you'd get back to me on Friday and you got back to me on Wednesday before Friday. That was amazing. Thank you. And that's just purely through our morning sprints, tracking the candidates on our Kanban board.
So just morning sprints and tracking your candidates on the Kanban board has created a step above for your candidate experience and your client experience all in one, right?
Sure. The main focus is not necessarily the client-facing side on that board. The board is mainly candidates, but it does help us. We also use it as a way of reducing bottlenecking, which is one of the pillars of RecOps that we have in our business.
Okay. And so how many pillars do you have in RecOps in your business? Sorry, Jay.
So there's four main ones that we're using at the moment. So we use data analysis, continuous development, reducing bottlenecking, and then sourcing support. So those are the main ones.
Yes, we are accepting in modern teams that sourcing is a part of your team. So you will have somebody who is sourcing on your team. Is everybody sourcing, or do you have a dedicated sourcing in your team?
Are we all involved in that?
Okay, fantastic.
You may not all be involved in the same role at the same time, but I mean, there's definite collaboration, especially if you're putting together a Boolean search. It's always nice to send it around. We chat about different profiles. I mean, we recruit in technology. Technology is changing so quickly that not only are the developers having to change or there's new technology, but the support roles are having to change. So we are recruiting roles that may not have existed prior. And so then we'll sit there, we'll chat about it, which backgrounds can fulfill that role. You know, often a client doesn't quite know, you know, does an IT lecturer have the same sort of skill set as you know, a marketing expert from the digital side, or so we end up sitting together and really brainstorming, creating our own avatars around these roles that may not have existed yet.
I love that. I'm going to jump back into the socials on the side. Thank you so much for your question. What an interesting one. We'll get to the second one in just a bit. Or shall we? There's a second question. Can we quickly look?
Fire away.
Yeah,
Fire away.
It says, what tool, for instance, Jira, CRM, ATS, Slack, what do you suggest for working remotely on the Kanban board?
Sure. So we've actually developed our own called Silo, which we... Yeah, but I mean, look, Jira is great if you're prepared to pay quite a bit. It depends if you're a one-man band, if you're a small team. We use Trello. We love Trello for the remote working side of things. It's so great. It's super easy to use. and it's free, I think, up to about 10 boards.
I'm
But then
going to put a link of that in.
you can have boards within boards. Oh, great. So you're not limited to that sort of information barrier.
I love that. I love Trello myself. I use it myself. So I'm going to go down to the socials again, and I'll see everyone on the side. See you later.
Cool.
Thanks, Jen. Can I just ask Danielle, did that answer your question? Maybe you can just let us know in the chat box.
Yeah, for sure.
The question you had. So, and yeah, thanks, Tim. Thanks, Justin, and welcome back, Justin. So Tim, one other term that you were using that perhaps not everybody might be familiar with is sprint. Can you give us a little bit of an explanation around what a sprint is?
Sure. So we use our sprints. Obviously, it's short-term attainable goals. It basically, we'll meet on a Monday. Sometimes we'll set our sprints according to the roles that we're working. So it might be a Monday to a Wednesday to a Friday. It might be just for the day of the Monday. But we basically set tasks that need to be completed by when, and it's not send 10 CVs by the end of today. They need to be attainable, and we all kind of hop onto them to assist. So prime example of one of our sprints that we're running now remotely is we recruiting a role in Joburg that the tech is not widely used. In fact, if you just do a standard LinkedIn search, I think there's only like 100 people that use the technology, and 90 of them are at our client. And so, to set a sprint that, we need to reach out to every possible person is at any exposure to the surrounding tech. So part of our sprint now is Justin and one of our other consultants, Adrian, he's a project manager actually, but the two of them are then working on that sprint. We've got Kira working on her own sprints, and then at the moment I'm kind of assisting on both, just to make sure that we attain the goals that we're setting for those. Use our Trello boards to also then manage which sprints are being met, which aren't, and that just helps us kind of keep track of everything.
So I love that what you're describing is not something static. It's not like you're even saying the way we do things is this way and this is how it's going to stay. You're constantly relooking it, constantly innovating, constantly testing what's working, what's not working, what can be working better. And I think it sounds like a whole culture that you have there around innovation and being flexible.
Everything we've done, from the get-go has always been adopting sort of A/B testing. So we'll create an A, we'll create a B, we'll test them against each other. We constantly test them against new philosophies, new ways of doing things, new processes. We've done it to the point that in our outreach, so everyone in our team has something very new and very different to bring to the party. So when we started preparing for our outreach, we allowed everyone to create their ideal email outreach, to give an example. And then we all sat down and tore apart each other's, just grabbing the best bits, and created this document that I'm super proud of, but it has evolved so hectically over the last sort of year. That document is, we're at the point now where, sometimes on our response rate, which is one of the metrics that Justin will chat to you about, our response rate can be anywhere from 60 to 90% at the moment, which is, it's high by international standards. And that's purely because one of the sort of things we focus on in our outreach is that everything in outreach needs to be hyper-personalized. So after the methodology, or part of it is that there needs to be at least 3 personalized aspects to each outreach. It doesn't matter if it's on the phone, it doesn't matter if it's on WhatsApp, it doesn't matter if it's on email. There needs to be at least 3. 3 is like the bare minimum. If you don't hit 3, don't send the mail.
Wow, I love that.
It's been super rewarding for us to see that. So, I mean, Justin, on the metric side, instead of our normal sort of metrics that we use, Justin can possibly tell some of the other types of metrics that we use.
Yeah, excellent. Please do, Justin.
Cool. I mean, so we're obviously speaking about response rates. I'm trying to think specifically what Tim's referring to as being a little different if we haven't touched on it already.
Well, it's not the placement sort of avenue. We're looking at, our outreach is tracked live, our response rate is tracked, our CV sends are tracked. At the end of each process, we send all the analytics, all the stats for that specific project that we work. We send it to our clients. We're including feedback, and sometimes the feedback might save us a day or two in the process. We've worked out, in our recruitment life cycle at the moment, our average recruitment sort of cycle from receiving the spec to receiving the signed off is 26 days. That is our data that we've compiled over the last 3 years. We're now working on how to reduce that, and part of that is obviously coming from our client side. If every recruiter could work at their pace, we'd all be super wealthy, and it'd be the best profession in the world to be in. So in that end of project feedback that we give our clients, we work on ways for them to improve their process. Sometimes something so simple. One question we've received a few times is, do they offer religious leave? But something like that, a smaller company may not have even thought of. So then you end up hitting this little bottleneck. It needs to go to a senior manager. Do we offer? Can we offer? They haven't written a policy around it. We offer guidance on writing that policy, speeding up the process, maybe saving us a day or two in that recruitment lifecycle.
And the benefit is, because we're retrieving the data and collecting the data, what we're able to do is sit and analyze and go, has our outreach numbers declined? Why have our outreach numbers declined? So it's being able to have that critical approach and have the data on the side that helps us to then make the better decisions and improve the process. And that's why it's all about exactly. And that's why there's the constant collaboration, the constant innovation throughout. So you can't expect it to work the same way that it did yesterday. Things are changing, people are changing. So
sure, excellent. I think something that stands out for me that I think we've always tried to encourage in the recruitment industry that hasn't always been a strength is rather over-communicate than under-communicate. Typically, recruitment consultants have taken a role, gone off, worked it, and then come back and, it's filled, or, we actually found someone internal. And I love that there's a constant update with the client, a constant transparency. You're not just giving them a person, you're giving them analytics at the end of the day. And I love that you're including your client in how things can be better the next time around. Because recruitment consultants take all the responsibility and are sometimes a little afraid to give that kind of feedback to clients.
Sorry, Justin, you go ahead, buddy.
I was just going to jump in before you touch on that, Tim. I think that the benefit of having this constant communication with your client is, for example, our process right at the beginning, before we even start working on a particular project, we basically emphasize to our client, this is what we understand to be the kind of person that we're looking for. And right from then, we don't waste any time looking for a person that's perhaps a little off from who they need to be, right? And I suppose you can spend a lot of time sourcing for someone and you find 4 candidates that you think are amazing, but in fact, it's not exactly what your client's looking for. So that constant communication just helps reduce unnecessary time spent.
That's what I was going to mention there. So every spec that we get, we end up creating a project scope and a project deliverables document. And that gets sent to our client, and it highlights our understanding of the role, it highlights the urgency of the role, and it highlights the deliverables that we will set. So we'll receive CVs by this date, and we can do the full project timeline, which shows the client exactly when they will expect the candidate to start. And we're predicting those through the use of the data analysis. We know, look, if it's a brand new role, we're gonna struggle a little bit on accurately predicting, but if we're talking a developer, we're talking a BA, we're very comfortable with those sort of roles. And so to this date, we actually haven't missed our deliverables. We've met our timelines every time.
That's brilliant.
Yeah,
because,
that's where it comes into, sorry to interrupt you there, that's also why we're able to allocate different resources to a project. If we're not going to hit the deliverables, then we can move the entire team onto one role to ensure that those deliverables are met, and ultimately just create a more sort of unified approach to completing a project.
And that the client needs to play a role in you being able to meet that target. That you're not just saying, we'll do it. You're saying, in order for us to be able to reach this or have somebody start on this date, this is what we need from you.
Yeah,
I love
we've actually had that now in lockdown. We've had a client say, look, we're desperately looking for a senior QA, and we sent them our project timeline, we sent them our understanding of the role, we sent them our deliverables. And they actually came back to us and said, well, okay, that's a little bit too quick. We're not that ready to make the hire. And that was just a prime example of how that document is so important in highlighting everyone's understanding of this process that it saved us, a week or two sourcing time because we now understand their timeline better.
Yes.
The client will only drag their heels when there's something in the process that they don't feel comfortable with. If they're unsure of the candidate, if they're unsure if they can make the offer by the end of this month, is it going to drag into next month? As soon as there's uncertainty, the client will generally start dragging their heels.
Yeah, so much better to identify that early on than when you feel like I've done all of this work, found the perfect person, and now why can't we move forward? So, I'm interested to know, sometimes, as part of your process, you're giving feedback to your client on what they can improve. Have you ever had any clients kind of resist that or react negatively to feedback from your side in terms of improvements they can make?
Not yet. I think generally if our process is optimized and they see that our process is optimized, when we start talking or sharing ways that they could potentially optimize, generally it's well received. Whether they implement the changes or not, I mean, that's up to them. We're not going to force them to do anything. But general, it highlights areas where they can improve. And most companies we're dealing with, specifically in tech, it's such an ever-changing industry that for them to remain stagnant in their process building is to their detriment. So we haven't had any negative feedback yet.
Excellent. And how do you raise it with them?
I mean, that depends on the relationship with the client. We've got companies that we work exclusively with, and generally, when we send the feedback from candidates, whether the process took too long from a candidate's perspective, whether the job spec was not adequate, because at the end of the day, a job spec now is a candidate's first impression of the company. It is so important, it's vital. So when we raise it with them, we generally raise it with the feedback sheet, because then there's data to validate what we're saying. As soon as there's no data to validate, and a client might think it's your opinion, is your opinion worth as much as data? So we're generally saying, look, this is exactly why it took too long. This is how we're going to improve it. Use it, don't use it, it's up to you.
Yeah, I love that. So that there's less chance of people taking things personally or being defensible, because it's about the facts, not about the people.
100%. There's no malice intended when we chat to them about it.
And so, I mean, all of these things that you're sharing that have really helped you to be able to deliver a better customer experience, candidate experience, client experience, recruiter experience, and consistently improve are things that you're saying are not static. So people on this webinar and people listening to you could say, okay, those are some great ideas. I'm going to try and implement that in our environment. But something that I hear you saying over and over is that your whole business is not static. You actually intentionally devote time to innovation.
For sure.
And in the world of recruitment, it's typically so busy, people don't take out time for just innovation. Tell us a little bit more about the value you place on innovation and how you go about taking time out for it.
Look, it's been something that started when Justin joined me. We would it started not being a full day. We would go grab a coffee. We always try to do it outside of the office environment, so you're free from distractions, because if you're in the office environment and the phone rings, you answer it, or you suddenly realize, you look at the Kanban board and Johnny hasn't been contacted, so we always try to do it, we'd go for coffee. There's a beautiful place in Prime Park in Deep River in Cape Town that does a bagel and coffee for $30. We love it there. So going there, yeah, I should get a free coffee for this punting.
Yeah.
So we would go there, we would chat, and it ended up becoming a full day affair where we would meet, we would understand what problems we've encountered over the last month. We would then work out, cool, this is the problem. Are the people facing it? How can we improve it? Where's the bottlenecking? And so we just became very intentional on how to solve that issue. And I think the intentional setting time aside, we've got nothing to distract us. We are just focused. I think that was really So the actual devoting of time to it really helped.
Also, like the value that we place on not stagnating. So not only as a business, but as individuals. So if you sort of approach everything in a, say that again?
So we've lost Jane.
Jennifer's back.
But it's okay, Justin, carry on.
Yeah, so what I was saying is when you approach a lot of, or when you place a lot of emphasis on continually learning and continually growing, not only as an individual, as a business, I suppose you see the reward. And, you know, stagnation's the worst thing that can possibly happen when you become comfortable doing the same thing over and over again in an economy that's always changing, in the industry that's always changing. You can't really expect yourself to continue to thrive. And, you know, that's why we place such a big emphasis on it.
Innovation also breeds growth. Ultimately, you know, as recruiters, you're chatting to, let's say you're chatting to 30 people a day. The top reason that we come across is I want growth. I want stimulation. And so innovation breeds growth. It breeds stimulation. It breeds excitement. If you're a developer and you're working on the same project for the next 10 years doing the exact same thing, it's going to get boring. You know, it's the same as recruitment. No one wants to cold call 9 hours every day. It's brutal. It's brutal to a person's soul. But, you know, through innovation, we're ultimately creating a better recruiter experience as well as a better sort of business. All of our stuff is optimized through that. And have recruiters that are engaged, recruiters that are stimulated, you end up creating a career recruiter, which I think our industry lacks. You know, we have far too many people that come into the industry. It's 1 year, it's out, it's tough, it's brutal, and they move on. And ultimately, that just ends up having people that are untrained in the market. It ends up giving us a bad name because there's no barriers to entry. Whereas if you have career recruiters, you know, you're passionate about change, you want to do something better in this industry. That's one of the.
Yeah, I love that. And I think something that is so crucial for innovation is an environment where there's a sense of safety to make mistakes. And I think with all I'm hearing around your transparency, your humility, your willingness to try something out, see how it works, get feedback on strengths and areas for development, creates a very healthy culture for people to come up with new ideas and not be afraid of this might be wrong or what if this is a mistake. So that really does help people thrive. So yeah, well done on that.
Thank you.
I think when we were speaking last week, when we were preparing for this conversation of ours, you had this amazing thing that you were doing, weren't you? And I think there may be a couple of takers for your, what was it? Your fitness. What was that? Oh, come, you have to tell us all about it now. Everybody's listening. And they can I tell you.
For those who don't know, Justin is an incredible trail runner.
The worst. It's so terrible.
He's sponsored by a couple of companies. But, you know, he's won 1 or 2 races. And he's kind of, but, you know,
we Justin.
We ended up having this, you know, and I think it's an industry related problem, is that business development is tough. Companies generally have their own sort of set of, you know, of agencies they use to get the preferred supplier list. So one of the ways that we tried to change the way we were doing business development was, there's an app called Strava that is like social media for athletes. And if you go on there and you chat to Justin, you can see that he engages with companies on Strava, and we challenge them to runs. And just creates this familiarity. It creates this, we're not only here to, you know, send you an invoice and smile at the end of the day. We're here to build a relationship. We're here to, you know, in 5 years' time, we're still going to be here, and we're still going to be challenging you. And hopefully Justin's still going to be winning. But it gave us a unique perspective and a unique way to hit the market, and it's definitely been to our benefit.
I think that's fantastic because, as we've mentioned before, and this goes to some of our other collaborations too, is collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. This is how we will survive. This is how we will grow. This is how we will have a better reputation out there, is if we collaborate with each other instead of being in competition with each other. This is the raison d'etre of Touchbase. Now, speaking of collaboration, you mentioned there's 4 pillars earlier on. The one was data analysis, reducing bottlenecking, sourcing, and what was the 4th one again, Tim?
So continuous development.
There you go. I'm going to write it down for everyone.
One of the things that we kind of identified on that front was we looked at the construction industry, and the construction industry has, you set your project, you quote on it, you do all that sort of, you do all that pre-project work. So in our agency, we've really done a lot of pre-project work, because at the end of the day in construction, if you don't meet your deadlines, if you're over budget, there are penalties. So our penalties are not necessarily financial penalties, they're not external penalties, but we set that deadline, we set all of that, and that's part of our process of getting to those pillars that I've just mentioned now. So, Justin, I think you had a little bit to chat about in terms of project management and operations merging. I don't know if you want to do that now.
Just from the perspective of different recruiters getting involved.
Yeah, you can chat about that.
I think so. Just right from the beginning, having that open collaboration from the beginning of every project, each recruiter knows exactly what's happening, where you're at in the project timeline, what deliverables have been met, which ones haven't. Sorry.
Yeah.
And the great thing there is, because there's this constant communication throughout the process. For example, Tim touched on it. If Tim has to go away on a business trip or heads out to the Karoo, one of us is quite capable of taking over his role. We know exactly where he is at the process. So having that sort of flow, even from just our daily stand-ups, it's also an opportunity to be held accountable. And yeah, so I think that's just briefly touching on it. Tim, do you want to elaborate a little?
No, that's perfect. I think accountability at the end of the day is everything. So if you are, it doesn't matter if you're reaching out to 100 people for a role. If your response rate is 12, you can say, the market's tough at the moment, or, this role's tough, the salary is wrong. There's always an excuse. But until you take that critical step in optimizing that, how can I better my outreach? Am I including personalization? Is my sales pitch accurate? There's no point in saying this company does, they offer a day's remote working, but it's now becoming an industry norm. And I'm reaching out to someone who's got like 4 days remote or is completely remote. One day is not sufficient. I'm not touching on what my set of outreach, sort of my outreach community is not being listened to, hearing them. I'm not understanding what they want.
Yeah.
So we often will, Justin will send me his outreach. I'll send my outreach to him. We'll all sort of be CC'd into each other's outreach to offer guidance on how to better that outreach. Is there a sufficient call to action? Is the call to action too salesy? At the end of the day, people want to be reached by people. They don't want to be part of a list that you send the same email to. They want to feel valued. At the end of the day, we need to place value on our candidates just as much as they need to place value on us. As soon as they place value on us, we then sit in a situation where you're making 30 phone calls, you're getting rejected. We become the most hated industry in the world, and it makes our job really hard. So yeah, I think that sort of collaboration, that guidelines in terms of our outreach really helps us.
I think that the great thing, just to touch on that, is each one of us brings a different element to the table, or to the recipe, I suppose. And so having that different perspective on the way that we do things, or having a different perspective on the way that we do things, is beneficial to our whole process.
Sure.
Yeah.
So with people out there who are maybe, running things according to more traditional methods or a traditional approach, maybe looking at, more traditional metrics in terms of how to measure their success or plan their success, what advice would you give people who are wanting to make that shift? and start to use this type of approach internally? Where should people start?
I think the very first step would just be start gathering data. If you have sufficient data to, work out, okay, what are metrics? Our metrics are maybe CV sends, referrals, placements. Why not set the metrics as something that is leading to that? Does money need to be a metric when if you make a placement, money will follow? Why break down the steps into smaller processes, smaller attainable, achievable goals, rather than have, the end placement being the main goal? Because at the end of the day, when we reach out to a candidate, I would rather reach out to 10 candidates, accurately portray our company, shed our company in a good light, market our company, than approach one candidate who's kind of good, give him kind of good feedback, and send him and hope the placement happens.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, gather your data, understand your data, and work out where you can possibly improve on that data. One of the things we did was obviously we understood the time it took for our placement to happen, which was 26 days. Now our goal is to get it to under 20. How are we going to do that? And that's, as soon as you start asking those questions, how, why, that's when you start then working, okay, cool. This is one of the barriers I'm hitting. How can we go around that barrier, go over that barrier, go under that barrier? There needs to be that thought process that needs to be intentional. Time needs to be set aside for that.
Absolutely. It's a far more focused approach, and it's eliminating that whole spray and pray method that I think Tim may have touched on. When you've got a focused approach, a tailored approach, your results are going to be reached a lot quicker and far more effectively than, just hoping for the best.
For sure.
Yeah, so it sounds there's a process element to it, and then I think, as you have both made so clear, there's a certain culture that goes with it as well. So if you don't already have a collaborative culture where people are willing to be transparent and make mistakes and innovate, then that's also going to stand in the way. Sure. So it looks like both of those need to work together for you to continuously improve.
Definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
Brilliant.
That someone's got a question on the metrics that we're using.
Jen.
Yes, we've only got a few minutes left. And we've got two questions. I did place that one on there, but we've got a question over here that says, you may have answered on this before, and have touched on it a few times, says Andrea, but what are your metrics for measurement? In your opinion, guys, what are your most favorable and valuable metrics when you measure in your world?
Wow. Our main metric, and it's the one that we spend a ton of time on, is our response rate. Whether the response is favorable or whether it's a negative response, that candidate still took the time to respond. So something that we put in our outreach was right. So the metrics that we use at the moment is outreach, response rate, CV send, and then interview setup. If we're sending 10 CVs and only setting up 4 interviews, it means we sent them 6 candidates that weren't ideal. So that's a metric that we always try and improve on.
So CVs accepted. Is that the fourth one?
So interview setup. So CV and interview setup, and then it's our success rate.
I'm making a note of this. Now, the second question that I have here that we've got, and we've got about 8 minutes left, so if anybody has more questions, time is now. Tanya says that we placed more emphasis on send outs, but this was years ago when I was a career recruiter. What are the main metrics now? I think this is the same question. So it's outreach, response rate, CV sent, interview setup, and then of course offer accepted probably, eh?
For sure, yeah. I mean, that's the next step in our cycle. But the one thing that I must just reiterate is also the success rate of the CV sends. So don't necessarily stick to, an agency might say you need to have 20 by the end of the month. We don't work on that. We work on a per project basis. So, all right, this role is a highly skilled CEO. We're not going to be sending 10 candidates. But out of the 3 or 4 we might send, I want all 3 or 4 to have interviews. They need to be of that. Otherwise, we've wasted everyone's time and we have not recruited efficiently.
This is absolutely where the power of data comes in again. This is why I'm always saying when I'm doing training in Boolean, data is queen. You always hear me say that. Data is queen. When you have data, you have information. When you have information, you can create strategies, and strategies will create success for you in the end. And this is what I think we're seeing with what you've come up with, which I think is absolutely fantastic. And I think that you should share it far and wide with the world.
Awesome, thank you.
What do you think, Jane?
No, absolutely. I'm so glad we have these two here. And not only do they have more athletic followers, there's more people following Justin. Not
sorry, Justin.
You have process followers and more athletic competitors.
Yeah, the inter-country recruiting cup is starting today.
Wow.
Hey, Justin, I bet you're going to find some takers for that one.
My goodness.
Who's the most athletic?
Yeah, challenge accepted.
But yeah, thank you so much. We really do value your time. We're very grateful that you set aside time to be able to share what you're doing, what's helping you be successful. And I think that just shows the very spirit of transparency and collaboration that you both live every day, in your willingness to share this with people who would normally be your competitors. So thank you very, very much. I think it's very valuable for everybody out there. Really, really do appreciate it. And look forward to seeing you running past with your coffee, Justin. We look forward to seeing you running through the mountains with your coffee.
Well, I mean, that would be quite impressive.
Okay, so we are going to, Jane and I are going to continue in this vein going forward. Bi-monthly, we're going to bring you valuable content that's on target with a new way of doing things. Thank you so much for joining all of us. We'll have this session live on our YouTube channel. You can join us on Touch Base on Facebook. I'm going to put in the link right now. And I can't wait to see all our guests again. Thanks again for being here, Tim, Justin, Jane. It was fantastic seeing you all again. We'll see you all in 2 weeks. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
See you again soon, Jane.
See you, Jane.
And I'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye.